The highway stretched endlessly across the flatlands of Oklahoma, cutting through cornfields and forgotten gas stations. A lonely sign stood by the roadside, "Welcome to Pine Creek, population 8021. The numbers looked freshly painted, but the wooden board was cracked, weathered by decades of storms and sun. As if the town had given itself a fresh coat of paint, trying to hide the rot underneath. Mark Reynolds adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of his own tired eyes. 42, former detective in Tulsa, now a man in search of silence, or maybe redemption. His old Chevy rumbled as he slowed down, the August heat making the asphalt shimmer like a mirage. The first thing he saw was the Silver Pines Motel, a ruin half swallowed by weeds. Its windows were boarded shut, the once bright sign now a skeleton of rusted metal. Locals said a fire had closed it 20 years ago, after 3 people died in a night no one liked to talk about. Mark didn't believe in ghosts, but the place had a way of watching you as you passed. The town center was small, a diner with flickering neon, a hardware store that smelled of oil and dust, a church tower casting a long shadow across Main Street. People here didn't hurry. They stood on porches, leaning on their elbows, following strangers with their eyes. On the steps of the police station stood Sheriff Tom Hargrove, a man in his mid-50s with a belly that spoke of too many diner pies and a smile too wide to trust. "Mark Reynolds," the sheriff asked, offering a firm handshake. "That's me," Mark said. "Thanks for having me, Sheriff. Call me Tom. Folks here value peace and quiet. You'll see, Pine Creek's a good place to start over. Peace. Quiet." Words that sounded like a promise, but Mark had learned those were the first things that broke. As he unloaded a few boxes from his car, he noticed a girl across the street. Lily Thompson, 17 at most, long brown hair tied in a loose ponytail, camera hanging from her neck. She wasn't looking at him. She was photographing the motel sign, her expression tight, like she knew something everyone else pretended not to see. "New in town?" she asked without crossing the street. "Something like that," Mark replied. "Then you should know, nothing really happens here. Until it does." And just like that, she turned and vanished into the side alley. That night, Pine Creek wrapped itself in stillness. The crickets sang, and the humid air smelled of rain. Mark sat by the window of his rented apartment above the diner, the glow of the streetlight painting yellow lines across the floor. He almost drifted off, until a scream cut through the night. It was sharp, young, and full of terror. Coming from the direction of Miller's farm, 2 miles out of town. Mark grabbed his coat before his mind caught up. Instincts were louder than exhaustion. Somewhere out there, in the fields of Pine Creek, the quiet had finally cracked. The dirt road to Miller's farm was soaked after a late summer rain. Mark Reynolds' headlights cut through the mist, picking out silhouettes of scarecrows standing crooked among the rows of damp corn. It was past midnight, but the entire place smelled of fresh earth and something metallic, faint, but sharp. Sheriff Tom Hargrove was already there, his cruiser parked sideways near the barn. 2 deputies stood by, their faces pale under the rotating red and blue lights. "You heard it too?" Mark asked, stepping out of his truck. "Half the county heard it," Hargrove muttered, tipping his hat back. "Neighbors called it in, said it sounded like a girl screaming. We searched the fields. Nothing." The barn doors creaked as the sheriff pushed them open. Inside, the weak light revealed rows of rusted tools, a tractor missing half its tires, and something stranger, a trail of muddy footprints leading from the back door to nowhere. Small feet. Bare. "Runaway kid?" one deputy offered. "Middle of the night, barefoot, in the mud?" Mark shook his head. "Who lives here?" "Old man Miller, but he passed away last winter. Place has been empty since. His nephew checks on it now and then." Mark crouched near the prints. The rain should have washed them away, yet they were sharp, as if left minutes ago. The trail stopped dead in the middle of the floor. No second set of prints. No drag marks. "Could be an animal, coyotes," Hargrove began, but his voice lacked conviction. "Animals don't scream like that," Mark replied. Something glinted in the hay near the back wall. Mark reached for it, a small silver bracelet, caked with dirt, engraved with the name, LT. His mind immediately went to the girl with the camera, Lily Thompson. "Sheriff," Mark called, holding it up. "This yours?" Hargrove frowned. "No. But I've seen her around. That Thompson kid. Restless one. Always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong." Mark slipped the bracelet into an evidence bag. "You said nothing ever happens here." "It doesn't," Hargrove said too quickly. The wind picked up, rattling the barn's tin roof. Somewhere in the distance, a lone dog barked. Mark looked toward the dark line of trees bordering the field. The night felt heavy, as if the air itself wanted them gone. "We'll write it up as a disturbance," the sheriff said finally. "Probably a prank. You know how kids are." Mark didn't answer. He was staring at the empty space where the footprints ended, a hollow in the hay that looked disturbingly like someone had been dragged down, not away. On his way back to town, Mark passed the Silver Pines Motel again. One of the boarded windows was open this time, just a crack, but enough for a sliver of pale light to leak out. When he turned his truck around for a closer look, it was gone. The boards were back in place, unmoved, as if nothing had changed. By dawn, the bracelet lay on his desk, glinting in the weak morning light. Mark had only been in Pine Creek for 12 hours, and already the quiet had begun to whisper. The first rays of sun turned Pine Creek into a postcard, golden fields, dew on the rooftops, the faint smell of fresh bread from the diner below. But for Mark Reynolds, the morning carried the weight of a question: where was Lily Thompson? He parked his Chevy in front of a modest, weather-worn house on Cedar Street. A tired woman with graying hair opened the door before he knocked. "Mrs. Thompson?" Mark asked gently. "Yes. You're the new detective?" Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Mark Reynolds. I'm looking for your daughter. Is Lily home?" The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. The living room was cluttered with old furniture, schoolbooks, and the faint hum of a TV left on mute. "She didn't come home last night," Mrs. Thompson whispered. "She goes out sometimes, takes pictures, but she always calls. Always. Do you know where she might have gone?" She was curious about that farm. "Miller's place. Said she heard stories about it." Mark didn't show her the bracelet yet. "If she contacts you, call me immediately." As he stepped back onto the porch, a familiar voice called out. "You really made an entrance, didn't you?" It was Sarah Whitman, the town's only journalist worth her salt. Mid-30s, sharp eyes behind her glasses, a notepad in hand like an extension of her fingers. "Heard about the scream," she said. "Whole town's buzzing. Half say it was coyotes, the other half, well, they've got wilder theories." "What kind of theories?" Mark asked. Sarah leaned against the railing, lowering her voice. "They talk about the old days. About the girls who went missing in the 90s. Sheriff called them runaways, but no one ever found them." Mark studied her. "And you believe that?" "I believe in patterns," Sarah replied. "And Pine Creek has a nasty habit of repeating them." She glanced around, then slipped him a folded clipping, a yellowed newspaper piece from 1998, "Local teen vanishes after leaving diner late at night, no leads." The photo showed a girl with the same haunted eyes as Lily. "The sheriff's not going to like you digging into this," Sarah warned. "But if you're smart, you'll start where they stopped." As they spoke, curtains in the neighboring houses shifted. People were watching. Pine Creek wasn't used to questions, especially not from strangers. "Why does it feel like everyone here already knows something?" Mark murmured. Sarah gave him a thin smile. "Because they do. They always do." Later, at the police station, Sheriff Hargrove was waiting by the coffee machine, his jaw tight. "Heard you were visiting the Thompsons," he said casually. "I'm doing my job," Mark replied. "And I'm telling you, don't stir up the town. Folks here don't like outsiders poking at old scars." Mark placed the bracelet on the desk between them. "This isn't a scar, Sheriff. It's fresh." The sheriff stared at it for a moment too long. "I'll handle it. You focus on settling in." When Mark left the office, he noticed a flyer pinned to the bulletin board, "Missing, Emma Lee Carter, 1996. Different name, same age, same empty eyes in the photo. Beneath it, someone had written in pencil, "We never forget." By dusk, whispers had already spread. At the diner, at the church, in the school hallway, the name Lily Thompson was now part of that whisper. And somewhere beyond the fields, the Silver Pines Motel stood silent, its windows boarded tight, or so it seemed. The cornfield stretched for miles under the pale light of the moon, their stalks swaying like restless fingers in the warm Oklahoma breeze. Mark Reynolds parked his Chevy on the dirt road and killed the engine. Midnight had stripped Pine Creek of its postcard charm, leaving only a hush that pressed against the ears. He stepped out with a flashlight and a worn leather notebook. The Miller farm looked different at night, the barn loomed like a carcass of rust and wood, and the empty farmhouse sagged against the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howled. Mark had returned alone, against Sheriff Hargrove's advice. The sheriff had called the case a false alarm and moved on. But the footprints, the scream, the bracelet, they gnawed at him like old scars. As he crossed the field, his boots squelched in the damp soil. He found the spot where the footprints had ended, still sharp despite the rain. Kneeling down, he brushed away a layer of straw and dirt with his gloved hand. The ground there felt uneven, softer than the rest. He pulled out a folding knife and dug gently. Within minutes, his blade struck something hard, a piece of wood, rotting, about a foot below the surface. Not a coffin, too small for that. A crate. Its lid was splintered, and a faded rope was tied around it like a careless bandage. Mark pried it open. Inside lay old fabric, a few rusted trinkets, and a photograph. It was black and white, water-stained, showing a group of teenagers in front of the same barn. One of them, a girl with freckles and short hair, was circled in red ink. On the back, written in cramped handwriting, Emma, 1996. The same name from the missing flyer at the station. A rustle behind him snapped him out of his thoughts. He swung the flashlight toward the cornfield. The beam caught nothing, just the shifting stalks. But the silence that followed wasn't natural. It was the kind that waited. "Who's there?" Mark called, his hand inching toward his sidearm. No answer. Only the whisper of leaves. Then, a faint crack, like a twig snapping, from the far end of the field. Mark ran toward it, his boots tearing through the mud, but the sound moved faster, retreating deeper into the maze of corn. He stopped, breathing hard, the night pressing in from all directions. When he returned to his truck, a chill ran through him. His glove box was ajar, though he had locked it. Inside, nothing was taken, except the bracelet. The evidence bag was gone. Someone had been here. On the drive back to town, the Silver Pines Motel loomed once again, its silhouette crooked against the moon. This time, a faint glow pulsed behind one of the boarded windows, steady, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Mark slowed down, staring at the building. The boards hadn't moved. The glow vanished as quickly as it appeared. Back at his apartment, he placed the photo from the crate on his table. The circled girl stared at him with hollow eyes, frozen in a time the town refused to remember. Beneath the photo, mud still clung to his gloves, a reminder that Pine Creek's secrets weren't buried deep enough. The next morning, Pine Creek looked the same, the diner smelled of bacon and black coffee, the church bell rang at 9 sharp, and Main Street bustled with its sleepy routine. But Mark Reynolds could feel it, the air had shifted. Whispers followed him now, from the post office to the gas station. Strangers didn't stay strangers for long here, not when they asked the wrong questions. He entered the diner, the little bell above the door jingling. Sarah Whitman was already there, notebook open, coffee steaming beside her. She raised an eyebrow as he slid into the booth across from her. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," Mark replied. He placed the water-stained photograph on the table. "Found this at Miller's farm. Recognize her?" Sarah leaned closer. "Emma Carter. Vanished in '96. She was 17, just like Lily." A waitress passed by, giving them a glance that lingered too long. Sarah lowered her voice. "You shouldn't carry that around. People here don't like old ghosts being dug up." "Someone already dug through my truck last night," Mark said. "Bracelet's gone." Sarah stiffened. Then you've got their attention. The door chimed again. Sheriff Hargrove walked in, tipping his hat to the patrons. His eyes found Mark immediately, and his smile was tight. "Morning, Reynolds. Enjoying the hospitality?" "If by hospitality you mean people rifling through my things, sure," Mark said evenly. The sheriff's grin didn't falter, but his voice hardened. "We don't want trouble here. Folks in Pine Creek value their peace." "Peace built on missing girls?" Mark asked. A silence rippled through the diner. Forks paused mid-air, conversations froze. The sheriff's hand rested on the counter, his fingers drumming slowly. "Careful what you suggest, son. Sometimes a town keeps quiet because there's nothing to tell." When the sheriff left, Sarah exhaled. "You just made yourself a target," she said. "I was already a target," Mark muttered. Outside, the August sun felt heavier. Across the street, an old man in a faded cap, Ethan Cole, the former owner of the sawmill, stood by his truck, staring. Not glaring, just watching, like a hawk waiting for a twitch. Mark approached him. "Morning," he offered. Cole spat tobacco into the dust. "You ask too many questions, stranger." "Maybe you've got answers," Mark replied. Cole's lips curled. "Some things in this town been buried for a reason. Digging them up don't make you a hero. Makes you next." Before Mark could respond, the old man climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving a trail of dust in the warm breeze. By evening, the whispers had turned into quiet resistance. Doors that had been left ajar were now closed. Eyes followed from behind curtains. Even Mrs. Thompson didn't answer when Mark knocked again. Sarah called him from a payphone outside the gas station. "I've been digging," she said. "There's a pattern, every few years, one girl goes missing. Always around harvest season. Always from the outskirts. The police file it away, families leave or go silent." "What about the Silver Pines Motel?" Mark asked. "That place?" Sarah hesitated. "Locals say it's cursed. Used to belong to the Cole family, Ethan's father ran it before it burned. If there's a secret, it's in there." Mark looked down Main Street. The motel's outline was just visible in the distance, framed by the fading sunset. "Then that's where we start tonight." The Silver Pines Motel loomed like a carcass of the past. Its neon sign, once promising warm beds and trucker coffee, now hung by one chain, swaying in the night wind. Boarded windows and peeling paint gave the building the look of a mausoleum. Mark parked the Chevy a block away and killed the lights. Sarah Whitman joined him, a small flashlight tucked in her jacket. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "You said it yourself, every trail leads here," Mark replied. "If the sheriff wanted this place off limits, that's a good enough reason to check it out." They crossed the gravel lot, boots crunching on forgotten cigarette butts and shattered glass. The entrance was chained, but the padlock had been rusted through years ago. Mark pushed the door open with a soft groan. Inside, the motel smelled of mildew and old smoke. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin, and dust coated the counters. A register lay open, its pages warped by time. The air was too still. As if the building was holding its breath. "Second floor," Sarah said. "That's where the fire started, according to old records." They climbed the creaking stairs, beams of their flashlights cutting through the dark. Doors lined the hallway, most of them ajar. Room 12 stopped Mark in his tracks. Its handle was polished, unlike the others. Recently touched. He pushed it open. The room was empty, no bed, no furniture. Just a dark stain on the wooden floorboards, half hidden beneath a tarp. In the corner stood an old wardrobe, its mirror cracked down the middle. Sarah ran her fingers along the wall. "Look at this," she whispered. A thin seam outlined a section of paneling behind the wardrobe. "Help me move it," Mark said. Together they shoved the wardrobe aside. A narrow door revealed itself, no knob, just a simple latch. It opened with a reluctant creak. Behind it, a small hidden chamber. The air was colder there, almost damp. Inside were shelves stacked with yellowed envelopes, old photographs, and a single leather-bound notebook. Mark picked it up, the leather brittle under his gloves. He flipped through the pages. Dates. Names. Some crossed out. Others circled in red. Emma Carter, 1996. Hannah Lee, 2003. Rachel Norris, 2010. Lily Thompson, blank, undated. My God, Sarah breathed. It's a ledger. Mark found another page, crude maps of the town, with marks on the outskirts. One mark matched the Miller farm. Another, a stretch of woodland near the river. And in the margin, keep them quiet. Always harvest. Suddenly, a noise from the hallway, a floorboard groaning under weight. Mark snapped the notebook shut and turned off his flashlight. Sarah did the same. They waited, holding their breath. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Then silence. Mark motioned for Sarah to stay put. He stepped into the hallway, empty. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, but now something else lingered, fresh tobacco. The same scent Ethan Cole had carried this morning. When they exited the motel, the chain on the entrance was fastened again. Someone's playing with us, Sarah said as they hurried to the car. No, Mark answered, sliding behind the wheel. They're warning us. He placed the notebook on the dashboard. The last page had a single line scribbled across it in thick, uneven ink. The town protects its own. The next day, Mark sat in his apartment with the notebook from the motel spread open on the table. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the pages with pale gold. Each name was a wound: Emma Carter, Hannah Lee, Rachel Norris. 3 girls gone, no one charged, no one convicted. And now, Lily Thompson, her name still fresh, waiting for a date. He copied the names into his own notes, adding the years, locations, any small detail Sarah could dig up from the archives. She had left at dawn to speak with the town clerk, promising to return before noon. At 11, his phone buzzed. Sarah's voice came through, sharp and low. Mark, someone's been in my motel room. My laptop's gone. Notes too. You okay? Yeah, but they left something on the bed. A dead crow. Mark felt a chill crawl up his spine. Stay in public places. Don't go anywhere alone. She paused. You think this is Cole? I think this is the town, he replied. That afternoon, they met at the library, the only place where whispers felt less dangerous than walls. Sarah spread out photocopies of missing person reports, each one thin, almost dismissive, as if the cases had been meant to vanish from memory. Every girl disappeared within a week of the annual Harvest Festival, Sarah said, tracing a line across the dates. It's the one event that brings everyone together, the sheriff, the church, the Cole family. If you wanted to hide something, that'd be the perfect cover. Mark leaned back in his chair. And the sheriff's been here through all of them. Sarah nodded. Same sheriff. Same silence. A rustle came from the far end of the library. A man in a flannel shirt stood among the stacks, pretending to browse. Mark recognized him, one of Cole's ranch hands. The man glanced their way once, then again, slower this time. We need to move, Mark whispered. They left through the back entrance, into the alley behind the library. A sheet of paper was pinned to Sarah's car windshield, a torn page from the ledger, with her name scrawled across it in red marker. They're watching every step, she said, voice tight. Mark folded the paper carefully. Then we stop hiding. Tonight, I'm going to the Thompson farm. If Lily's still alive, that's where the trail starts. You think the family's involved? Sarah asked. In Pine Creek? Everyone's involved. The question is, who's pulling the strings? As dusk fell, Mark drove alone to the edge of town, headlights cutting through the fields. The Thompson farmhouse sat in shadow, its porch light flickering. No one answered when he knocked. No sound from inside. But on the porch rail, he saw something glinting, a charm, like one from a bracelet. The same kind he'd found in the mud near the Miller farm. Behind him, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of church bells from town. 7 chimes. A reminder, harvest season had begun. The harvest festival had begun. Pine Creek's main street glowed with strings of orange and yellow lights, laughter echoing over the scent of caramel apples and roasted corn. Families wandered between stalls, children's faces painted like tiny tigers and fairies. It was the perfect camouflage. Mark Reynolds parked near the edge of the fairground, the leather notebook pressed to his chest. Sarah Whitman had insisted on joining, despite the risk, carrying her camera and a recorder hidden beneath her jacket. "We blend in," Mark muttered. "Keep your eyes open." They moved through the crowd, noticing how people avoided their gaze. Even familiar faces, like the Thompsons and Ethan Cole, offered tight smiles or hurried past, muttering pleasantries without eye contact. As they approached the Miller farm, a bonfire crackled in the distance, lighting up the surrounding fields. Mark's stomach churned. Somewhere in the darkness, shadows moved unnaturally, slipping between trees and hay bales. "There," Sarah whispered, pointing toward a group of men and women gathered near the barn. All wore jackets and hats, faces obscured. Their posture wasn't casual, it was deliberate, ritualistic even. Mark took a step closer, heart pounding. Among them, he recognized Sheriff Hargrove and Ethan Cole. And there, slightly apart, a figure crouched, a glint of metal catching the firelight, a blade, hidden until it caught the flames. "They're waiting," Sarah said softly. "For what?" "I don't know. But it's not just tradition. Look at the way they're organized." A scream shattered the night, high-pitched, panicked. Lily Thompson bolted from the shadow of the barn, eyes wide. Mark reacted instantly, sprinting toward her. He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a hay bale. "Mark! They'll kill me," she cried. "They know I saw the lights in the motel, the ledger." Before he could respond, a whistle cut through the air. The group near the barn moved as one, advancing toward the edge of the fairground. They weren't just townsfolk, they were a protective unit, a network ready to defend their secret. Mark pushed Lily down, scanning the crowd for a distraction. He spotted Sarah, camera raised, snapping photos. One man turned, eyes locking on her. His hand moved toward a belt. "Go!" Mark shouted to Lily. She ran, ducking behind stalls and screaming for help. Mark tackled the man before he could reach Sarah. A struggle ensued, punches and kicks under the cold glare of the harvest lights. Ethan Cole appeared suddenly, intercepting Mark. A heavy hand slammed him against a wooden post. "Leave now, detective," Cole hissed. "This is Pine Creek. You don't belong." Mark's vision blurred from the force, but he held the notebook tightly. "You think hiding decades of crimes makes you untouchable?" Cole's eyes darkened. "We protect our own. Always have, always will." The bonfire flared higher, casting grotesque shadows across the field. Screams echoed, dogs barked, and the festival music continued, oblivious to the chaos in its midst. Mark felt the weight of the town pressing down, but something fierce and undeniable ignited inside him. He would not back down. Pine Creek's secret was out, and he had seen the ledger. No matter what, someone had to pay for the decades of silence. The next morning, Pine Creek seemed calm, a deceptive calm, like the eye of a storm. Mark Reynolds and Sarah Whitman met at the library, notebooks and photos spread across the table. The ledger from the motel lay between them, its pages whispering decades of hidden crimes. "We need a map," Mark said, tracing the locations of the missing girls. "Every disappearance is tied to a location controlled by someone in the town. Look, Miller Farm, Cole's sawmill, the river bend near the old church." Sarah nodded, adding her research. Every time, the sheriff closed the case. Neighbors spoke, but no one ever testified. And now it's our turn to document it properly. They began cross-referencing old police reports, school records, and newspaper clippings. Each connection formed a web: Sheriff Hargrove, Ethan Cole, the church pastor, the librarian, even the diner owner. The town wasn't just silent, it had been complicit. "See this?" Sarah pointed to a list of names in the ledger circled in red. These were all last seen near a festival or gathering. "Look here, 1998, 2003, 2010. Same pattern. Every 5 to 7 years." Mark scribbled notes. And Lily fits the pattern perfectly. That scream at Miller's farm was no accident. Someone wanted to test her, intimidate her. They decided to visit the river bend first. Mark drove cautiously, Sarah beside him with the camera ready. The location was a secluded stretch, reeds thick and the water shallow, reflecting the mid-morning sun. "This is where Emma Carter disappeared," Sarah said softly. She crouched to examine the ground. Footprints, too fresh for old soil, muddied from last night's rain. But more importantly, she noticed faint drag marks. Something had been moved here. Mark's heart sank. And no one reported it. As they documented the site, a car engine rumbled nearby. A black pickup stopped 100 feet away. A figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered. Mark recognized him immediately, Deputy Collins, one of Hargrove's men. "What are you doing here?" Mark called. Collins smiled, too wide. "Enjoying the scenery," he said, voice casual but sharp. "You should leave, detective. Some places aren't meant to be disturbed." "We're not leaving," Mark replied firmly. "Not until we know the truth." The deputy's smile vanished. He stepped closer. "The town protects its own. You really want to test that?" Before Mark could react, Collins turned and strode back to the truck. The engine roared, disappearing down the dirt road. Sarah exhaled. "Every step we take, they're watching. And it's not just the sheriff or Cole, it's everyone who's ever been involved." Mark nodded, flipping through the ledger again. The names, dates, and locations formed a skeleton key. "We have the proof," he said. "And soon, the world will know. Pine Creek's secret can't hide forever." That night, as they returned to town, the streets seemed emptier than usual. Lights in windows flickered, shadows shifted unnaturally. On the porch of the Thompson house, Lily waved a small flashlight. She had been hiding all day, observing, learning. Mark realized then that they weren't alone, Lily was part of this now. Together, they would unravel decades of silence, deception, and murder. And somewhere beyond the fields, the Silver Pines Motel stood, its boarded windows dark and silent, but no longer untouchable. Mark Reynolds paced the small apartment, the notebook from the Silver Pines Motel open on the coffee table. Sarah Whitman crouched over her laptop, cross-referencing photos, maps, and old records. The air was thick with tension, the quiet hum of the city beyond the blinds felt like a distant world. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, pointing at a faded photograph she had found in the library archives. It showed a teenage Emma Carter standing beside Ethan Cole Sr., the patriarch, outside the Silver Pines Motel. The date, 1995. 1 year before Emma disappeared. "And here," she continued, opening another file, "Rachel Norris, 2010, same pose, same kind of photograph, same location. The family always took pictures of the girls before they vanished." Mark felt a chill. It's ritualistic. They were marking them. Preparing them. Documenting them. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up old town records and property deeds. Ethan Cole and the sheriff own or control almost everything, the motel, the farmland, even the warehouse district. Every disappearance happened near one of their properties. Mark leaned back, rubbing his temples. And the town covered for them. All these years. No questions asked. A knock on the door startled them. Mark reached for his flashlight, then relaxed slightly when he saw Lily Thompson standing there. Her expression was grim, determined. "I've been keeping track," she said. "I know where they take the girls, where they hide them before the harvest festival. There's a cellar under the old barn at Miller's farm. It's where they keep things." Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah. "Then tonight, we go there. We document everything. Photos, videos, anything. If we're going to blow this wide open, it has to be undeniable." Night fell quickly. The moon hung low, casting silver light over Pine Creek. Mark, Sarah, and Lily moved silently through the fields, the notebook and camera gear carefully concealed. The barn loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the night sky. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth and rot. Mark shined his flashlight along the walls, noticing marks in the wooden beams, initials carved decades apart. Emma Carter, Hannah Lee, Rachel Norris, each marking a year, each a silent testimony. Then they found it, a trapdoor concealed beneath loose hay. Mark lifted it slowly, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The sound of dripping water echoed below. Lily swallowed hard. "This is where they keep evidence, and sometimes, people," she whispered. Mark snapped a few photos, documenting everything. Sarah carefully recorded the markings, the trapdoor, even the scent of the cellar, every detail that could tie the Cole family and the sheriff to decades of disappearances. As they ascended back into the barn, the distant howling of dogs reminded them they weren't invisible. The town had eyes everywhere. But for the first time, they had proof, undeniable, physical evidence linking the Cole family, the sheriff, and the town's silent complicity to a string of decades-long crimes. "We have it," Mark said, voice low but firm. "Now, we make them face it." And somewhere beyond the fields, the Silver Pines Motel stood silently, its boarded windows watching, as if aware that the tide of truth had finally begun to rise. The morning after their visit to Miller's barn, Pine Creek felt unusually quiet. Too quiet. Mark Reynolds and Sarah Whitman met at the diner, tension thick enough to taste. Lily Thompson stayed behind, hiding at a friend's house, her parents warned not to interfere. "Something happened last night," Sarah whispered, scanning the street outside. "My apartment was broken into again. Nothing stolen, but there's a note on my door this morning." Mark unfolded the crumpled paper. Written in uneven red ink were 3 words, "Stop or disappear." "This isn't a threat anymore," Mark said grimly. "It's a promise." The waitress placed 2 coffees on the table, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. Everyone in Pine Creek seemed to know before anyone spoke, and no one wanted to get involved. "We need to be careful," Sarah said. "They know we have evidence now. The sheriff, Ethan Cole, the network, they can't let this get out." Mark nodded. "Tonight, we either move forward with proof in hand, or we retreat. No half measures." By late afternoon, they split up. Sarah went to photograph old town records at the courthouse. Mark visited Miller's farm again to double-check the barn and hidden cellar. The sun was low, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for them like fingers. As Mark stepped out of his truck, he noticed tire tracks in the dirt, fresh, heading toward the barn. A black pickup, the same one he had seen the night he documented the river bend. He moved quietly, flashlight tucked into his jacket, ears straining. From the barn, muffled voices rose. He crept closer, peeking through a crack in the wood siding. Ethan Cole and 2 men he didn't recognize stood over the cellar hatch. "We can't risk her screaming this time," one said. "The town will understand," Cole replied coldly. "She knows too much." Mark's stomach churned. They were discussing Lily. The words made it clear. It was no longer just the girls from the past, Lily's life was in immediate danger. He backed away silently, heart hammering. This was escalation. They were now targets, not witnesses. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah felt a presence behind her at the courthouse. Papers rustled, a shadow shifted. She turned abruptly, empty hallway. But the faint click of shoes against concrete told her someone had been there. Her laptop was untouched, but a thin scratch across the back suggested someone had rifled through it, unseen. Back at Mark's apartment, they convened. Lily had been kept safe by a neighbor, but the message was clear: Pine Creek would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. "We need allies," Sarah said. "Someone outside town, who can help us publish and protect Lily and the evidence." Mark leaned back, eyes narrowed. "And we'll need to move fast. Once the sheriff knows we have proof linking him and Cole to all this, nothing in Pine Creek will be safe. They'll try to destroy us before anyone else sees the truth." A sudden knock at the door made them both freeze. Not the usual soft knocks. This one was deliberate, heavy. Whoever it was, they knew where Mark lived. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look. The line had been crossed. The fight wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about survival. The night was thick with fog as Mark Reynolds and Sarah Whitman drove out of Pine Creek, the notebook and photos of Miller's barn hidden in the trunk. Every shadow along Main Street felt alive, eyes following, ready to strike. "We can't wait any longer," Sarah said, gripping the steering wheel. "If we sit on this, someone will get hurt. We need to leak the proof." Mark nodded. "We'll contact an independent journalist outside town. No names, no connections to us. The world needs to see the ledger, the photos, the maps. Pine Creek's secret cannot survive exposure." They parked near the edge of a highway, dialing a number Sarah had found in an old contact list, a reporter in Oklahoma City who specialized in investigative stories about corruption and crime. "This is Reynolds," Mark said into the phone, voice low but steady. "We have evidence, decades of disappearances covered up by a town, the sheriff, and a family called Cole. We need you to publish it. Anonymously." The reporter paused, then replied, "Send everything digitally. I'll verify and run it. Make sure you cover your tracks. People die for this kind of secret." Mark hung up. The adrenaline surged, but with it came dread. They had no idea how fast the news would spread, or how violently Pine Creek would react. Back in town, the city seemed unnaturally silent. The diner was closed, shutters down, and streetlights flickered as if in warning. Then, a shadow moved across the fog. Ethan Cole emerged from the darkness, his face pale in the lamplight. "You've made a mistake," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "The town protects its own. You leak this, and lives will end." Mark stepped forward, notebook clutched. "People already died. And you're next if you continue hiding this." Cole's lips twitched in a grim smile. "Try me." From the alley, the sheriff appeared, flanked by 2 deputies. Hargrove's eyes were hard, calculating. "Mark Reynolds," he said slowly, "you have no idea what you're doing. You've crossed a line the town won't forgive." Mark held his ground. "The line was crossed decades ago. You let girls vanish, families beg for answers. That line isn't mine, it's yours." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cole glanced at the sheriff, then back at Mark, calculating. But they did not move forward. Mark realized something: by going public, they had shifted the balance. Fear now worked both ways. Later, in a safe house outside town, Sarah uploaded the scanned ledger, photos, and location maps to a secure cloud. The journalist confirmed receipt. Within hours, the first article would appear online. Mark exhaled, exhausted. "It's done. Pine Creek can't hide anymore." Sarah shook her head, worry etched on her face. "But they know we did it. This is only the beginning. The retaliation will come, faster and harder." Mark looked at the fogged windows, thinking of Lily and the other girls. "Let them come. We won't stop until every secret is exposed. The town hid a killer for decades. That ends now." And somewhere, in the dark heart of Pine Creek, Ethan Cole and the sheriff realized that the ledger, the cellar, and the hidden truths were no longer theirs to control. The town's silence had shattered, and with it, their power. The morning after the leak, Pine Creek was alive with a restless energy. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Local news trucks had arrived, and soon the first reporters would descend, hungry for the story. But within the town, fear turned to fury. Mark Reynolds, Sarah Whitman, and Lily Thompson met at a secluded cabin outside town. The windows were shuttered, the road behind them was barely visible in the thick morning mist. "They know we did it," Lily whispered. "I saw men in pickups circling the barn last night. They're planning something." Mark nodded grimly. "It's no longer subtle. They're coming for us." By midday, the first signs of retaliation appeared. The power at the cabin flickered, then went out completely. Tires crunched outside, but when Mark and Sarah peered through the blinds, the fog masked everything. A message was spray-painted on a tree at the edge of the property: "Leave or die." Sarah's hands trembled as she snapped photos. "This is escalating faster than we thought." Mark grabbed his coat. "We need to draw them out. If we stay hidden, they'll just wait. But if we confront them on our terms, we can expose them more." As night fell, they set up cameras and tripwires around the cabin. Every shadow, every sound became a test of nerves. Hours passed. Then the first attack came, a volley of rocks against the windows, shattering glass and splintering the shutters. "Go!" Mark shouted. He grabbed Lily, moving through a back exit. Sarah followed, carrying the notebook and camera. Outside, headlights cut through the fog. 2 pickups approached, engines growling. Mark led them to a nearby wooded path. The town had deployed its protectors, deputies, Cole family men, even some townsfolk loyal to decades of secrecy. They moved with calculated precision, blocking escape routes and cutting off visibility. But Mark had planned ahead. Hidden behind the trees were small cameras and recording devices set up earlier, capturing every detail. The attackers' faces, voices, and tactics were being documented for the world to see. One figure emerged from the shadows, Ethan Cole himself, flanked by Sheriff Hargrove. Cole's face was pale, controlled fury in his eyes. "You've ruined everything," he said. "Leave now, or we'll make sure you vanish like the others." Mark raised the notebook. "No. The ledger is already public. The truth is out. Every person you've hidden, every girl you've taken, it ends here." Cole lunged, and chaos erupted. The forest echoed with shouted orders, the cracking of branches, and the sound of struggle. Mark fought back, using the terrain to his advantage. Sarah shouted, directing Lily to move to safety while documenting the confrontation. Hours felt like minutes, but by dawn, the attackers had retreated. Exhausted, bruised, but unbroken, Mark, Sarah, and Lily emerged from the trees. The recordings on their cameras captured every movement, every face and voice involved in the town's decades-long conspiracy. The town had tried to fight back, but in doing so, they had revealed themselves to the outside world. Pine Creek's silence had been shattered. The town had shown its strength, but now its weakness was laid bare for everyone to see. The dawn mist hung low over Pine Creek, softening the edges of the town that had hidden so many secrets. Mark Reynolds, Sarah Whitman, and Lily Thompson returned to the Silver Pines Motel, the night's recordings and photographs secured in waterproof bags. The air was heavy, each breath a reminder of the danger they had survived. "It's time," Mark said, voice tight. "We know the network. We know the complicity. But we need the final link, the one who actually took the girls." Sarah spread out the ledger, now filled with notations, cross-references, and old photographs. "I've been going through every clue, every eyewitness account, every scrap of information. And there's one name that appears consistently in places, but never in reports: Jonathan Cole, Ethan's cousin. He was always in the background, unassuming, never questioned." Mark's eyes narrowed. Jonathan Cole, the quiet one. Always polite, barely speaks in public. But he was present near every disappearance. Lily shivered. "He came to my school once. Always watching. I thought it was just him being nosy." "Nosy?" Sarah said, shaking her head. "No. That was him marking potential victims." They returned to the barn at Miller's farm, the scene of so many horrors. The trapdoor, the cellar, the carved initials, every piece of evidence now pointed to Jonathan. A small, hidden compartment under the staircase contained personal items, hairpins, ribbons, small trinkets, souvenirs of victims. Mark held one up, stunned. "This is proof. Direct evidence linking Jonathan Cole to the disappearances." Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. Jonathan Cole emerged from the shadows, calm, almost serene. His eyes cold, calculating. "You shouldn't have come here," he said softly, voice like silk hiding steel. "It's over, Jonathan," Mark said, stepping forward. "We have the ledger, photographs, and witnesses. Your family and the sheriff have been complicit for decades, but the world will know the truth." Jonathan smiled thinly. "Do you really think they'll stop me? Or the town?" Sarah stepped closer, holding up a recorder. "It's not just Pine Creek anymore. The evidence is out there. Journalists, authorities, the internet. Your secrets are gone." For the first time, Jonathan's mask faltered. Anger flashed in his eyes, but the reality settled in: the network protecting him could no longer operate in secrecy. The trio carefully documented the items in the compartment, every ribbon, hairpin, and personal object a testament to lives lost. Jonathan Cole, the man who had haunted the town's darkest corners for decades, was exposed, not just as a serial killer, but as the centerpiece of a town's decades-long conspiracy. As they left the barn, the first rays of sun broke through the mist, illuminating the Silver Pines Motel. Mark realized that Pine Creek would never be the same. The town that had hidden a killer for decades had been unmasked, and justice, delayed though it was, would finally begin. Jonathan Cole remained, a shadow of the past, but the ledger, the photographs, and the truth were now in the hands of the world. The town's silence had been shattered, and no amount of fear or intimidation could put it back together. The streets of Pine Creek were restless. Word of the leak had spread like wildfire, and the town that had hidden so many secrets now buzzed with fear, anger, and uncertainty. Mark Reynolds, Sarah Whitman, and Lily Thompson gathered at the cabin, watching the approaching headlights of vehicles moving with purpose. "They're coming," Lily whispered, eyes wide. "Everyone who helped them, they want to stop us." Mark nodded. "We knew this day would come. But we have the proof. Every name, every date, every victim is documented. We're not alone anymore, the outside world knows." By dusk, a group of townspeople had gathered at the edge of the property: Ethan Cole, Sheriff Hargrove, a dozen loyal townsfolk. They carried torches, signs of intimidation, and weapons concealed under coats. The tension was palpable, a powder keg ready to ignite. Ethan stepped forward, voice commanding. "Mark Reynolds, Sarah Whitman, leave now. Turn over the evidence, and no one gets hurt." Mark held up the ledger, the photographs, and the recordings. "No. The world will know. The truth cannot be buried any longer. You've hidden crimes for decades. This ends tonight." The crowd murmured, some with fear, others with defiance. Sheriff Hargrove's gaze was cold, calculating, but the momentum had shifted. For the first time, the town's protectors realized they could not fully control the narrative. Sarah raised the camera, capturing every face, every gesture. "We've recorded everything. Every threat, every plan. When this goes public, there will be no deniability." A tense silence followed. Then, Lily stepped forward, her voice strong despite the quiver in her chest. "You all think fear will protect you. It won't. You can try to silence us, but the truth is louder than your lies." Ethan Cole's jaw tightened. "This town is ours. We decide what happens here." "Not anymore," Mark said firmly. "The evidence is already with journalists and authorities outside. Every detail of your complicity is documented." Some in the crowd hesitated. Whispers broke through the tension. Families exchanged worried glances, realizing that decades of complicity could not withstand exposure. Fear crept into their eyes, a reflection of what they had inflicted on others for so long. Sheriff Hargrove spoke next, voice low and begrudging. "We didn't want it to end this way." Mark stepped closer. "You had a choice decades ago. You chose silence. You chose complicity. Now the choice is gone. Justice will prevail." Slowly, the crowd began to disperse, realizing resistance was futile. Ethan Cole, pale and rigid, disappeared into the darkness, along with Hargrove and the Loyalists. The threat had not vanished entirely, but the immediate confrontation was over. Mark turned to Lily and Sarah. "It's not over. We need to ensure the authorities take action, and that the victims are remembered." Lily nodded, eyes bright despite exhaustion. "We made them face the truth. That's something." Sarah exhaled, the weight of the night lifting slightly. "Justice isn't easy. It's messy. But at least it's finally possible." As the first rays of dawn broke over Pine Creek, the town that had hidden a killer for decades was left to reckon with its past. Mark, Sarah, and Lily had survived the night, armed with the evidence, the truth, and the knowledge that even the most tightly knit conspiracy could not endure forever. The sun rose over Pine Creek, casting long shadows over streets that had been silent with fear for decades. Mark Reynolds, Sarah Whitman, and Lily Thompson sat in the cabin, watching the town slowly wake, knowing nothing would ever be the same. Outside, news vans arrived, reporters bustling with cameras and microphones. Pine Creek's darkest secrets were now in the spotlight. Every photo, every ledger page, every recording they had risked their lives to secure was being broadcast to the world. "They're here," Sarah whispered, pointing to the swarm of journalists moving through Main Street. "The story is breaking everywhere. The world knows." Mark exhaled, relief and tension mixing. "It's out. No one can erase this." At City Hall, investigators and state police had arrived, combing through the Silver Pines Motel, Miller's Farm, and other properties tied to the Cole family. Officers took statements, photographed evidence, and detained those complicit in the decades-long conspiracy. Ethan Cole and Sheriff Hargrove were among the first to be questioned, their power reduced to defensiveness and panic. Lily, watching from a safe distance, felt a strange mixture of fear and vindication. For years, she had carried the weight of memories she barely understood. Now, justice seemed possible. "Do you think they'll go to prison?" she asked Sarah quietly. Sarah smiled softly. "If the evidence holds, yes. But more importantly, the victims, and you, finally have a voice." Mark looked at the town with a mix of sadness and hope. "It won't heal overnight. But Pine Creek has no choice now but to confront its past." In the days that followed, media coverage intensified. Stories of missing girls, of police complicity, and of the town's silence reached every corner of the state. Former residents came forward, sharing memories and testimonies. Families long denied closure began to find it. For Mark and Sarah, the work wasn't finished. They continued documenting, ensuring that every shred of evidence was preserved, and providing guidance to investigators. The risk of retaliation remained, but the exposure had shifted the balance irreversibly. Lily, meanwhile, began to reclaim her life. Therapy, support from outside friends, and a new sense of purpose helped her process the trauma. The town that had tried to hide a killer for decades was now facing accountability, and she, once a silent observer, became a symbol of resilience. As evening fell, the cabin was quiet again. The trio sat together, reflecting on the journey. "It's strange," Mark said, voice low. "We started this to find the truth. Now, we've uncovered much more: corruption, fear, complicity. And yet, it feels like a beginning, not an end." Sarah nodded. "Truth is only the first step. Justice is what follows. And hope is what Pine Creek needs now." The first stars appeared in the sky, faint but steady. For the first time in decades, Pine Creek's shadowed streets seemed almost alive with possibility. The town that had hidden a killer had been exposed, and although the scars remained, the path toward justice and healing had begun. Months had passed since Pine Creek's darkest secrets were revealed. The town was no longer the silent accomplice to decades of horror. Investigations continued, court cases loomed, but a sense of renewal had begun to permeate the streets. Mark Reynolds walked down Main Street, the sun casting golden light over familiar storefronts. Some buildings had been repurposed, others were boarded up, reminders of a past the town could no longer ignore. The once hidden horrors had become public knowledge, and the air felt lighter for it. Sarah Whitman joined him, carrying a stack of new case files for review. "It's strange," she said, eyes scanning the streets. "The town is quiet, but in a different way. It feels awake." Mark nodded. "It's as if Pine Creek is finally breathing again." Across town, Lily Thompson played in the small park near her new home. Her laughter rang clear and free, a sound that hadn't existed for years. Therapy sessions, support groups, and friends outside Pine Creek had helped her rebuild a life interrupted by fear and secrecy. Now, she could dream again. At City Hall, investigators finalized reports, charging Ethan Cole, Sheriff Hargrove, and others involved in obstructing justice. The courtroom buzzed with media attention, but the evidence Mark, Sarah, and Lily had collected ensured that truth prevailed. Convictions were imminent. One evening, the trio gathered at the edge of Miller's Farm, the barn still standing as a solemn monument to the past. Mark placed a hand on the weathered wood. "This place, it's where it all started. Where the truth came to light." Sarah knelt, examining the carved initials of victims etched decades ago. "We can't erase what happened. But we can make sure it's remembered, and that the town learns from it." Lily approached, a small smile on her face. "I'm not afraid anymore. And I want to help others who were silenced." Mark and Sarah exchanged a look, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had survived fear, threats, and violence. They had exposed a killer and a town's complicity. And now, they could guide the survivors and the town toward healing. Weeks later, Pine Creek held a small memorial for the victims. Families gathered, lights were placed on the river, and names were read aloud. The town, once bound by silence and fear, now honored the lives that had been stolen. As the sun set, Mark, Sarah, and Lily stood together, watching the reflections of the candles dance on the water. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a symbol of endings and beginnings. "A new dawn," Mark said softly. "For the town, for the victims, for all of us." Sarah nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "A dawn of truth. And hope." Lily leaned against them, feeling safe for the first time in her life. The shadows of the past lingered, but they no longer controlled her. Pine Creek had faced its darkest hour, and now, for the first time, the town, and its people, could begin to heal. The stars appeared one by one, faint but unwavering, a quiet promise that even after the deepest darkness, light can return. Even after the public exposure of Jonathan Cole and the complicity of Sheriff Hargrove and others, Pine Creek was far from peaceful. The streets carried whispers of fear, anger, and resentment. Some townspeople refused to accept the verdicts and the new reality. Mark Reynolds returned to the Silver Pines Motel to collect more evidence for ongoing trials. Each step felt heavier, the town had changed, but the shadows lingered. Sarah joined him, carrying files and photographs. The court dates are piling up. People are scared, but also angry. Some want revenge. Mark frowned. It's understandable. They've been lied to, controlled, and terrified for decades. But revenge isn't justice. Meanwhile, Lily walked to the small community center, which had become a safe space for survivors and witnesses. Volunteers and therapists worked tirelessly to offer support. Yet she could sense the tension. Some families whispered about taking matters into their own hands, unsettled by the truth finally revealed. Late that evening, Mark and Sarah drove past the river bend where some of the earliest victims had been taken. The area was cordoned off for investigation, but the night air was thick with unease. "Even with convictions, there are people who won't forgive, won't let it go," Sarah said quietly. Mark nodded. "And there will always be those shadows. But at least now, the light is stronger." Back at their cabin, the trio received an anonymous message, a photograph of Jonathan Cole's cousin, distant relative still unknown, watching the town from afar. The words scribbled on the back chilled them. "Some secrets are never buried." Lily shivered. "Do you think there's more? Another one we didn't find?" Mark shook his head, though unease lingered. "We can't know for sure. But we'll be ready. We've faced the worst of this town, and survived." Sarah added, "The important part is, we have the evidence, and the authorities are involved. Pine Creek can no longer protect the darkness." The night stretched on, quiet but tense. Pine Creek had begun its path toward healing, yet the shadows of its past, the distrust, the fear, the lingering threats, reminded Mark, Sarah, and Lily that even in the aftermath of justice, vigilance was necessary. The town slept uneasily, but for the first time in decades, the residents were awake to the truth. The courthouse loomed over Pine Creek like a sentinel, a reminder that the town's secrets could no longer be buried. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Families of victims, townspeople, and journalists crowded into the small courtroom, every eye focused on the unfolding trial. Mark Reynolds and Sarah Whitman sat in the gallery, folders of evidence stacked neatly in front of them. The ledger, photographs, recordings, every piece of evidence painstakingly gathered, now formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Ethan Cole and Sheriff Hargrove were brought in, handcuffed, flanked by officers. The town's whispers rose to murmurs of shock, disbelief, and, in some, a reluctant acknowledgement of justice. "Ladies and gentlemen," the prosecutor began, voice firm, "for decades, Pine Creek has concealed crimes that cost innocent lives. Today, we will present evidence, irrefutable proof." of the complicity and criminal acts committed by members of this community. The trial proceeded, hour by hour. Witnesses testified, some breaking down in tears, recounting years of fear and silence. Survivors shared memories, and for the first time, their voices carried authority. Mark and Sarah were called to the stand, providing testimony about the investigation, the evidence they had gathered, and the threats they faced. The defense tried to discredit them, suggesting bias or interference, but the meticulous documentation and corroborating statements left little room for doubt. Outside the courtroom, tensions ran high. Reporters broadcast updates live, and the townspeople could no longer control the narrative. Social media amplified every testimony, every piece of evidence, until Pine Creek's darkest corners were exposed to the world. As the trial progressed, Jonathan Cole's name surfaced again. Not only as the serial killer but as the nexus of a network of complicity that included family members, law enforcement, and those who chose silence over justice. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as details emerged, meticulously cross-referenced and backed by photographs, recordings, and witness statements. Even the most loyal residents of Pine Creek began to grasp the scale of the betrayal. Their protective silence, their fear-driven compliance, had allowed a killer to operate unchecked for decades. Mark watched as the jury absorbed the evidence. The room held a tense, almost sacred quiet, the kind that comes when truth finally confronts denial. As the first day of the trial ended, Sarah whispered to him, "It's working. The evidence is undeniable. The town will finally face what it ignored for so long." Mark nodded. "And this is just the beginning. The law will move slowly, but justice will come." In the evening, outside the courthouse, Pine Creek streets were filled with a mixture of relief, anger, and reflection. Residents had witnessed the beginning of accountability. The town that had hidden a killer for decades was now forced to confront itself in full view of the law, and the path to redemption, long overdue, had finally begun. Months had passed since the courtroom drama that shook Pine Creek to its core. Convictions had been handed down, Ethan Cole, Sheriff Hargrove, and several others were imprisoned, their decades-long web of corruption dismantled. The town had been forced to reckon with its past, and slowly, very slowly, began the process of healing. Mark Reynolds walked down Main Street, now lined with freshly painted buildings and small community initiatives. A mural had been erected near the town square, a tribute to the victims, and a reminder of the darkness that had once been hidden. Sarah Whitman joined him, holding a stack of new reports and plans for a community center focused on supporting survivors. "The town is changing," she said, voice tinged with hope. "People are starting to accept responsibility and work towards something better." Mark nodded. "It's not perfect. There are still scars. But the future doesn't have to repeat the past." Across town, Lily Thompson ran along the playground in the new community park. Her laughter, once rare and tentative, now rang clear and free. Therapy sessions, friendships, and a support network had given her the strength to reclaim her life. She no longer lived in fear, she lived in possibility. The trio gathered at the riverbank where memorial lights floated, honoring the victims lost. Families of the deceased, friends, and townspeople stood together, acknowledging their collective grief, responsibility, and hope. Mark looked at Lily. "You've been so strong through all of this. You helped expose the truth, and now you're free to live." Lily smiled, her eyes shining. "It wasn't easy. But I know now that fear doesn't have to control me." Sarah added, "And you're not alone. Pine Creek is learning to face the truth, one step at a time. We'll make sure the town remembers, but also rebuilds." Evenings in Pine Creek grew quieter, peaceful, but not empty. Stories of resilience and survival were shared in homes and cafes. The town's wounds remained, but they no longer festered in silence. Pine Creek had learned that confronting darkness was the only way to allow light in. As the sun set, Mark, Sarah, and Lily stood together on a hill overlooking the town. The streets below glowed with the last light of day, a symbol of endings and new beginnings. "A new dawn," Mark said softly. "A new beginning," Sarah agreed. Lily placed her hand on theirs, a quiet promise of continuity, of vigilance, and of hope. "For the first time, it feels like anything is possible." The stars appeared overhead, steady and unwavering. Pine Creek had survived the revelations, the trials, and the shadows of its past. And now, at last, the town, and its people, could begin truly living again.